Well, welcome again to these short talks where we're looking together at the account in the Old Testament of Nehemiah and the way that God was using him to rebuild the broken walls of the city of Jerusalem. And what we've been seeing, how that there was a lot of work being done before the actual reconstruction work took place. But the point we're picking up today is where Nehemiah has actually arrived in Jerusalem. But before he embarks on actual reconstruction, there's something he needs to do. And that's recorded for us in the book of Nehemiah and chapter 2. If you want to follow this through in the Bibles you may have in front of you, it's from verse 11 onwards. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. By night, I went out through the valley gate towards the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on towards the Fountain Gate and the King's Pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. I think it's very important to see from this passage as to why Nehemiah was doing what he was doing. He was undertaking a thorough examination of those walls of Jerusalem. He wanted to assess the full extent of the brokenness of those walls. He wasn't going to gloss over the situation. He wasn't going to push it away or imagine or ignore it, imagine it wasn't there. But by night he went to see for himself the extent of the brokenness which existed. Notice that he only had a few other people with him, and he certainly hadn't told the officials or nobles or people in authority exactly what he was doing. And that's probably because he did not want their distracting presence. He didn't want them to cast doubt on the possibility of anything changing, taking place. He didn't want them to point out how bad things were and they couldn't possibly get any better. He didn't want to be distracted. He wanted to assess fully for himself what was going on. And I think that speaks to us about our own situations and indeed those of those people around us, that with God's help we actually need to really see where we're at, not to gloss over things, but to see and face up to the fact that we are broken in so many ways in the sense of our identity, as particularly earmarked by these walls, but broken in our minds and spirits, broken because of all the repercussions of what we're having to go through and indeed will have to go through in the days ahead. They could affect us financially, in our health, in our situation, in our work, in our relationships, in our church life, in our standing with other people. So many ways are we going to be affected, as we already are, by the present situation. And we need to be real. And the psalmist, so often when he's writing, is upfront about how he sees things, about what he's gone through, and about his state within his heart, within his mind and spirit. And so that's borne out by Nehemiah's example here, that he's going to those walls, he's seeing fully what is going on. But he doesn't stop there, because as we read on in chapter 2, we find that he then goes to these elders, the people in authority, and this is what he says. You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. So Nehemiah doesn't stop with looking at those walls and seeing the devastation. He goes on to tell these elders about his plans, and he specifically says the gracious hand of the Lord being upon him. And we need to draw that as a way of encouraging us, because we're not alone in this. We're not doing it by our own efforts, or indeed the efforts of those just alongside us. But it's God who is going to work within us, as indeed he has been doing. Nehemiah rehearsed to these people what he had experienced of God's help so far, which we'd noted in previous talks, how that the king had granted him permission, how he'd given him authority to take the necessary materials that were needed, even to the extent of providing an armed guard for Nehemiah as he travelled to Jerusalem. Following that news which he'd received about the devastation, he knew that God's hand was on him in these different things. And it's a good exercise, if you like, for us to, as it were, retrace the ways in which we have known God's help and blessing. Okay, things are not brilliant and we are still in a bad way, but we can see that God's hand is upon us. So really, just to finish this little talk with reminding ourselves and asking you to recount and remember the ways in which you have known, as indeed we have all known in many ways at this time, God's gracious hand in us being upon us, because it's that which is going to strengthen us and give us the resolve that we need as we trust in God, knowing his help, to embark, as these elders, these people in authority said to Nehemiah, come, let us start to build. So let's start building with God's help. Amen.